Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and Chief Burnout Officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Emily Bermes on the line. Emily, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am awesome. Been looking forward to this conversation because I know you do a ton of work in the human capital space, and obviously with this pandemic and changing work locations and just all kinds of different things that you really wanted to get your insights on some of this. But for the audience, why don't you share a little bit about you and this awesome work you do?
Yeah. So own a small boutique consulting firm based out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. We work nationally and internationally with, Fortune 500s and startups and everything in between, every industry, I'm pretty sure. And we focus primarily, our two biggest segments, I would say, are executive onboarding. So helping executives come into new VP to CX, whatever role in a thoughtful, strategic way, and helping them ensure that they're successful. And then probably the other biggest bulk of our work is assessing executives that are in role, either because they are seen as high potential and people want to know kind of where they stand and what they need to do to move up, or they're in a new role and they're in a little bit over their heads and they need some help tweaking. So those are our two big product lines.
Yeah, where were you a few years ago when I needed that, when I was entering mid-executive world? Your work is critically important, because what we find in industry, and obviously this is nothing new to you, is the people that rise through the ranks and become C-suite executives and senior leaders in organizations are there because of their skills and their talents. But one of the things is, being a leader of an organization or a department or a division is a lot different than managing a department or a division or a program, because different skill sets, different approaches. Yes, it's awesome that you have a operational understanding of things. And I think that makes leaders strong when they have an understanding of how everything tends to work. But I find, and I'm sure you agree with this, a lot of times those people really struggle with making that segue from being really hands-on, doing things, to more of a visionary directing, and really using their skill set to identify areas of opportunity, areas of improvement, and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a big jump for sure. And those jumps are, that's why we're here, right? To help people figure out, okay, I was successful in this last firm or in this last company or in this last role because I did X, Y, Z. And usually when you change, either the way you do it is different because the company is different and what they expect is different, or you're having to elevate your work and get out of the weeds and stop doing so much and start leading and doing other things. Those are tricky spots. And I think that the most agreed upon stat is that, 50% of people get it wrong and they don't last and they don't get the results. And that's, primarily why we're here, either to help them get it right off the bat, or, okay, you've been there 18 months, it's not going great, but we can, try and see if we can help you salvage that. But these are not intuitive moves for people. And I would say, even more for men, because you just said, I'm here doing the task and I'm getting things done, and then I've got to elevate. And, men are inherently, social science people can disagree with me. And I was a social science researcher, so let them. But men's brains are wired differently, and they are wired for task. And so one of the things I see is during that jump, take the tasks away from men, and it doesn't feel good, right? The thing that I do, and again, and it gets results. You can't do that anymore. Now you just got to talk a lot. And, men in particular can struggle with it. Women struggle for other reasons, but when you were talking about completing the tasks, I was like, oh, that's why it's hard for men to make these jumps, because the thing that feels good and that comes naturally and that they've been doing forever doesn't work anymore. And they're kind of left to go, well, then what does? And it's tough. It's tough.
In many ways, it kind of feels like you've been picked up and dropped into a completely different country where you're not familiar with the way how things are, even though you might be in the same office building that you've worked at for the last decade, but you feel like you're just completely foreign. You're like, what in the world's going on? And I'm anticipating that the challenges that many of these leaders have faced, let's toss in a pandemic and working from home, where before many organizations, even though, the technologies existed, many organizations did not have their teams working remotely very often. Then all of a sudden, spring of 2020, everybody gets sent home. And now, it's a completely different world. And implementing things, how do we work with teams? What the heck is Zoom? What's, collaboration? And I think a lot of people were apprehensive at first because, they were all using tools that they may not have been familiar with, even though the core work that needed to be done, collaborating with people, how are things going with our projects, messaging and all of that, that technology has been around for a while. And I think people were used to some of it, but the actual, okay, how do I navigate this? And then, oh, by the way, the backdrop of, things are closed. There's this virus going around killing people. And why are my kids still here? Where are they supposed to go? Oh, the school's closed too. Okay, now how do I navigate that? It's been a challenging time for leaders. And not that their leadership roles weren't challenging to begin with. So, what are some of the insights that you've seen in the work that you do in the helping these leaders navigate just the pandemic and the changes that threw at us?
Well, I wish I had a short answer for that, and I don't. So to get piece by piece, I think, one of the things that I'm seeing, and especially now that things, for a bit there, we're reopening, depending on when people listen to this, they're shutting back down again. But, when I was able to get back out on site with clients, one of the things that, companies have struggled with is, do we go all remote work? Do we make people come back? Do people want to come back? And some do, some don't, right? And what I'm seeing from a cultural standpoint is, you go into these, big corporate headquarters, that 2 years ago were full of people and vibe and energy. And, so when I would have a new executive, and it's like, okay, you're brand new to this company, but here's where, here's who you need to know, and here's how to build relationships, and here's how to get connected, and here's where you fit, right? And I can't point to anything right now to say, here's where you fit and here's where you should be hanging out. And so people's abilities, I think, because most relationships are built informally, not formally, and everything on Zoom is planned and formal. And so, you're missing out on the running, past your colleague in the big cafeteria and saying, hey, I saw you did this. And she's like, yeah, I did. And I could use your insights. And so there's ways that people build relationships that isn't happening now. And you've got people building influence in ways that isn't happening now. And people that are prone or keen on being promoted are not being seen now. So they can't have these spontaneous, natural, organic ways of A, building relationships, which is critical, B, learning the culture, which you've got to be in it to see it and feel it and hear it, and then you kind of get it, right? These chances to be pulled in on something because you just happen to be in the hallway with so-and-so that thought, oh, you'd be a good person to pull into this meeting. Well, you get pulled into that meeting and there's, 5 upper level folks in there, and now they're seeing you and hearing you. And so, my experience through the pandemic has been that people are struggling to really, if they weren't prior to the company, if they were new from the outside during pandemic and they got hired in, they're struggling. They're isolated. They don't have friends at work. They don't know who to trust at work because they don't have the relationships. And so, and then just to go to the culture, some of the companies that I served before the pandemic and now, I'd go in and it was a humming like environment, right? And now you go in and it's no one's there. And so the few people that are there, who are probably your people that like people, are like, there's just no people here. There's no vibe. There's no energy. There's nothing. Like, it's just this empty, stale, boring building with nobody in it. And so I think, and I'm not a doctor, so I'll spare comments on, what the procedure is. But what we're doing is not being great for corporate culture. It's not being great for people that are trying to build relationships and get visibility. I would say I think it has helped some families cope with, shutdowns and schools and quarantines and all of that, but only so much, So to some point, they're like, my kid is out of school all the time. And like, I have one pair of, they're a couple, they're in the same company and they're both very, very high level, C-level folks. And they're like, the kids are never in school anymore. And he's got a big job and I've got a big job. And neither one of them can really just be like, oh, well, I'll just stay home. So I think, my gosh, for working parents, it's been nothing short of a nightmare. And I'm just glad my kids are grown, because the parents that I work with are just struggling because they don't have that built-in time for their jobs. And it's been tough. It's just been tough.
Yeah, it's been really hard for people, and leadership can be a lonely situation, especially if you don't have a peer within your organization. That's why I always encourage leaders to connect with other leaders, even if it's not even in the same sector, to just bounce things off. And yes, the stress and the burnout that people are facing with this pandemic has been horrendous. Not just the simple fact of things opening and then closing and opening and closing, and you think, okay, I've been vaccinated X number of times, and now I caught it type of situation. You hear stories about that all the time, and the frustration levels are throughout everyone. And then you throw on the work environment type of situation. It's bad. And that when you were talking about going into the offices and how they just have no vibe or no energy, it feels like you're going into a downtown, let's say a big city, or even, smaller city that have, office buildings and things like that. It feels like when you go into those buildings, it feels like you're going there on a Sunday morning around 8 a.m. There's nobody there. It's got this weird, wow, you hear the heat or the air conditioning, depending on what time of year it is. You hear that, and like, I've never heard that before. And I've worked in this building for a decade. I've never heard that machine before. What is that noise? So that's the air conditioning. Because normally there's people and equipment and, and people engaging. And, I don't have, and most of us really don't, as much as we'd love to, okay, what's the right ingredient? We don't know. And I think that's one of the things that's frustrating for so many people is we're so used to being able to say, okay, well, design it this way and do this and this. And we don't know what things are going to look like. The playbook is being written as we're going through this, which is not typically what they teach us in school. But that's what we're facing right now. And I always encourage people, organizations I deal with, or whatever the case may be. It's like, look, just give yourself a bit of grace, understanding that we're all fumbling through this. Take it day by day, focus on your well-being. And when you need guidance or help, by all means, ask for it and get that help, and just do everything you can to be the person and be confident as a leader, saying, I don't know. And I know that's, again, one of those things where a lot of leaders, but come on, we can't expect any leader, I don't want to get political here, but we can't expect any leader, even leaders of governments or businesses or states or whatever, to have the answers, because the answers aren't there yet. And the key is just to, all right, what do we need to do as an organization to make sure that our customers' needs that they have right now, we're meeting them, and just continue to touch base with your customers as best you can and adjust accordingly. And once this is, however you want to define, done, and we go to the next stage of whatever work is going to look like. I don't want to use the normal word. I don't think we knew what normal was before all of this. And we certainly don't know what normal is right now. But I think at the end of the day, focusing on making sure your people have everything they need to do their job well, from the CEO down to the janitor and every level in between, and have those conversations, those human conversations, and where, nothing's off the table, and it's like, let's sort this out. And, being an optimist, I guess, I hope that organizations will take that opportunity to do that both now and then as time progresses, because when they do, coming out of this traumatic experience that so many people have had to face, I think that a lot of organizations will be stronger than they were before, a little bit more connected. At least that's my hope. I might be delusional in that,
I don't know.
but it's sometimes we don't know. I think the strong ones will, the ones that weren't strong beforehand, well, then they'll hopefully can adjust accordingly, or it'll be a big shift. But I think at the end of the day, it's all going to be good. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about your new book. You released a book called Bombproof, and what's that book about?
It's about executive onboarding. So I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to onboard, it's been about 100 executives now into new roles, and most in Fortune 500, although we've had a spattering, like 15% maybe in smaller companies. And, it was something I never had an interest in. I didn't pursue that work. I was just asked to fix a fail rate at a company, and particularly with outside hires, particularly with women, like they just didn't stick, right? And when I onboard an executive, I interview usually 10 to 15 people around that executive to say, like, what do you want him or her to do? What do you want them to not do? What should they be careful about? Where are the dead bodies buried? Essentially, like, how do I help this person like fit in and do what people want them to do? Because people think, oh, the boss will tell me what my charter is. And the reality is that's not true. The whole organization has an opinion about what you should be doing, and you need to listen to those stakeholders. So, what was really unique about this opportunity was that I got to do so many in such a short period of time that it was just a super deep dive. And I'm a researcher by training. And so for me, it was just like swimming through data, year after year, and going, okay, there aren't unlimited mistakes you can make. There aren't unlimited expectations people have. There aren't unlimited things that help things go well, right? It all fits into a pattern. And so, for me, Bombproof was, to your point earlier in the conversation, you said, Jay, I wish I would have had someone to help me get into my last role. Well, no one gets that. And companies are starting to do it, but in a pretty light touch kind of way. And we started this work almost 10 years ago now. And we go pretty deep in with the executive, like we weed through a lot of stuff. And, my takeaway was, this stuff is hard. Taking a new role is super hard. It's super easy to get it wrong. It takes almost no effort to get it wrong. And it takes actually a lot of really strategic, creative thinking to help it go right. And, what made me sad after doing the work for so long is that there aren't very many people that are going to get someone like me or someone from my team to help support their integration and make sure that it goes well. And, these folks are taking risks. They're moving across country. They're moving their families. Their spouse has to get a new job, like new schools for the kids. Like, these people are taking huge risks on these jobs. And about half the time, it doesn't go well, right? So to me, the impetus for the book was really, look, it's a small firm. We're a small firm. We're less than 10 people. I don't want to get bigger. I'm almost 50. I'm not going to grow this firm. And I have no big ideas that I'm going to take over the world. But I do want like the learning of, interviewing everyone and then coaching someone for 6 months and working with their teams and making sure it goes well. And our stats are quite good, I think. But it kind of feels meaningless when it's like, okay, but for one person that we touch, there's 100,000 people that don't have any support. And so the emphasis was really to take what I've learned from the case study of each individual executive that we've onboarded and every interview that we've done to help prepare them to be onboarded and just consolidate it into a user manual. So, it's not the next great American novel, but it's a really good strategy book for just, this is the data you need. This is how you get it. Here's some stories that represent the points I'm trying to make. So it's a fast read. And, and at first, I think because I've been swimming in this work for so long, to me, the book is like, is there anything even new in here? And I wasn't sure. And, before it got published, I sent it to, the chief human resource officers that I know who, run some pretty good companies. And I'm like, is there anything in here that's unique or interesting or different? And you've got a CHRO telling you, I don't know half of this. That's a problem. That means your business people don't know a quarter of it, I think. So I don't think it's, genius work, but it is definitely evidence-based. It's definitely research-based. It's definitely pressure tested in the real world. And I think you can read it in about an hour and a half. And I think people will know a lot more about how to integrate into a new role, into a new team, into a new company, into a new mission in ways that I don't think is intuitive. Because our clients are not stupid. They're coming out of, Kellogg and Harvard. And they're smart, top level people. And no one taught them any of this stuff. So I think it's a good way to prepare yourself for those kinds of changes in your career. And everyone's changing careers right now. So it's probably a good time to get the book.
No, I completely agree. I think every organization and leader, no matter what level they are, should pick up this book because, and again, it's great because it's one of those books that gets right to it and it gets you through it. And I agree with you. It's like when you have chief HR officers to say that they didn't know half of it and they know a lot when it comes to employment and people and all of that. It speaks volumes to the opportunity that organizations have to better onboard, because we see it all the time. Years and years and years and years and years ago, I'm afraid to say how long it was. I used to be in IT and I worked for Russell Reynolds, executive search firm. I was based out of Chicago, and we brought in, I saw in our lobby, who's who of executives, that were, moving around and all of that. And during my time there, I'd see some of those executives a couple times because, they would go into an organization, they'd be there for a cup of coffee, and then they're on to their next adventure because it wasn't the right fit. And I thought, okay, something's missing here. And I know what it was. It was Bombproof. And so, if you get in the TARDIS and, if you're a Doctor Who fan and go back in time and drop the book back then, but it would have been helpful for a lot of organizations. But I highly encourage people to pick up this book because the work that you do and it makes better organizations, and better organizations have better employees and happier, healthier employees. And what happens then is your happy, healthy employees make better products and services than you and I and everybody gets better products and services out there. It's simple. And I know because you've done this work for so long, it's part of your DNA, and you say, I just see it. But as you've discovered, now not everybody else does, but now they have a roadmap so they too can improve how their organizations are ran and how their leaders become better. And that just has a ripple effect that improves everything. So, Emily, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, this book, and everything else you do?
The book, the landing page for the book is bombproof.com, and my website is bermesassociates.com.
And I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So
Google my last name, you'll find it all.
There you go. And I'll also have it in the show notes. So Emily, Again, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being on the show and for this awesome work that you do.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.